Are you living in an emotional state of stress? Stress is an emotion usually coming from a thought of frustration, anger, nervous tension. But since emotions are physical, our body responds to these challenging thoughts and becomes overwhelmed. Our brain likes to conserve energy and keep us safe, or so it thinks. Sometimes it even keeps us stuck in a state of stress. It does this because that state of stress is familiar and it requires the least amount of change, even when the change would be good for us. Your brain looks for ways to keep us in this emotional state, just out of familiarity. This causes us to feel like we're living in survival mode and not really living. Stress can block us from being that channel of love and mercy and grace that we all want to be. It can cause us to show up in ways that we really don't want to, and that can affect our relationships and even cause more harm. For many people, stress is their normal, so their brain just keeps thinking this is normal and keeps them in stress mode. However, having elevated cortisol, which is what stress does, for long periods of time actually damages the brain. It can cause health problems and even lead to adrenal fatigue. Feeling overwhelmed can lead to nervous system dysregulation. In fact, it's the most apparent sign that your nervous system is dysregulated. A dysregulated nervous system is at the root of chronic illness. It causes the heart rate to increase, causes rapid breathing, and it prepares you to fight a bear, but it really can lead to even bigger health problems. When my children were younger, we would go out into the garden sometimes and pick weeds. Now, I don't want to give the impression that I'm a great gardener, but I did enjoy dabbling with gardening, and I still do. I used to tell them that if they'd help me pull the little weeds out of the garden, I'd pull the big ones. And I'd always give them the illustration that pulling those little weeds is much easier than the deep-rooted weeds. And I look at that in the same way as stress. When we feel ourselves getting a little bit stressed, we need to go ahead and deal with it as soon as we can before it grows into a more deep-rooted, chronic state of stress. The stress hormone cortisol raises when we're stressed to kill the bear. But when we don't really kill the bear and we just stay in this state of stress, our cortisol stays elevated, unfortunately. And this causes a host of problems, one of which is hormonal imbalances. We need to lower the cortisol naturally by lowering our stress. Speaking of stress, anxiety is kind of like borrowing future stress. It's like we have a little child inside of us who needs to be reassured of safety because it's afraid of the future. So it wants to avoid the future. And what really happens is that fear causes it to avoid living in the present. It just may feel like we're living in survival mode and not really living. Grounding exercises and practicing mindfulness helps us to reconnect with the present. There are often other emotions that are involved, like fear. We can slowly process them, and then we feel less anxious. This is so important to catch because it can lead to bigger problems too, such as depression. Trauma can be small or big. It's very individualized. Trauma is considered an extreme stress. But what is trauma to one person may not be trauma to another person. But regardless, for all of us, unprocessed trauma is stored in the body, and it wants out. What matters is whether we have the capacity to process it and let it out or not, because we are designed to process emotions, not carry them around. Much like when a dog shakes after it's been through trauma, we need to shake off some stress as well. But when we deny that it exists, it does stay stuck, and it resides somewhere in our body. Emotions, remember, are the language of the body. So when they're not processed, they stay in the body until we process them physically. Things such as crying, walking, exercising, journaling, dancing are all great ways to process emotions. You can go back and listen to podcast number 3, which is Unpacking Our Backpack, which helps clarify processing emotions. But talking through trauma can be helpful. However, it really must be processed physically to fully release trauma from the body. I'm not making light of trauma. It's a very serious issue. Many of my clients have trauma in their background. I have trauma in mine as well. Once they have recognized how it affects their daily lives and relationships, they were motivated to work on it and to successfully release it. These clients have some of the biggest testimonies. Once emotions are processed, trauma is processed, we can choose to think thoughts that will serve us better. Because even if a thought is true, the trauma is true, the stress is true, the anxiety is true, we have to look at it and evaluate how it's serving us. Is it causing more stress, more trauma, because we hold so tightly to it? If we learn to release it, we can find thoughts that will serve us better. These new thoughts will most likely not really change the circumstance, but what they change is our reaction to our circumstance. This is how we renew our mind. This is taking our thoughts captive. You can choose to break free from the stress and the overwhelm. You can even choose to create safety and to support yourself in a safe way. There's so many ways to do this, but a good one to start with is simply to stop retelling yourselves the stressful situation. Stop focusing on the stress. It's almost like if you can just picture yourself holding the stressful situation in the palm of your hand and looking at it. It puts the perspective of you have it in your hand. You're taking it captive rather than it taking you captive. And this signals your brain to look at it in a new way. Instead of focusing on and retelling the story to yourself, which caused your brain to keep looking for more reasons to be stressed, your brain looks for the evidence always to support your thoughts. So by keeping a perspective of you're in charge of the stress, and you can choose to let go of it if you want to choose to let go of it, it helps your brain to see it that way too. It helps your brain to look for evidence of how you could let go of it. What would it be like to let go of that story? How would it change me to let go of that painful story, that stressful story? When you take a few minutes and step away like that from the stress and spend time intentionally not stressing, you can see a big difference. Some things I have found to be very successful for myself and for clients is spending time outside, spending time with people who are an encouragement to me, reading, journaling, meditating on scripture, praying, praise music, deep breathing, exercising, dancing, and so much more. These things are individualized too, so I want to encourage you to find the things you enjoy. When we are in a constant state of stress or survival mode, we really stop doing the things that bring us joy because our body is too focused on preparing to kill the bear. It doesn't make time for fun. It doesn't see fun as necessary to kill the bear. But when we rediscover the things that we enjoy, we can rekindle that joy for living. So I want to encourage you to be creative. Discover a new hobby, or maybe rekindle an old hobby that you've put down. Allow yourself to regularly do these things that bring you joy. Make a commitment to yourself and keep it. Put it in your planner and follow through as if you would to a commitment to someone else. The work, the stress, the difficult situation may still be there when you come back to it, but you will have more capacity and better tools to handle it. And that will cause you to show up to your life and relationships with more of you and less stress. Until next time, this is my hope for you. You can find me at stephaniejohns.com or on the Instagram at The Hope Coach. You can also use the links below to join my email list or the form for one-on-one coaching.